Hi there. Okay, so now let's move on to the narrative aspects of art creation and how you can use that to build your scene. And in this lecture, we're going to talk about specifically about your character and how your character can shape the environment. Now, remember this, we created this in a previous lecture. I showed you how to identify elements within the design brief that will allow you to build, key visuals within your art, within your scene. So I want to take that idea and expand it further. So remember, we have a forest, and there's a fellow in there called Wart. He lives in a rickety hut. That's as much as we really knew, really. But now I've created a character bio for this guy. And what I'm going to do now is show you, add some narrative behind why he's there. Why is he living in the hut? Why is he in the forest? Just ask all these questions. What does he look like? All this stuff, all these elements will help you build a really compelling scene. And I'm going to take this further, and I'm going to build the scene based around this character bio, basically. So you can see, this is a character bio. I mean, a character bio, you can go to town with a character bio. You can really, really go to town and really create something really quite detailed. I think I've got a couple of pages here. And, I'll just go through it and then you can see. So basically, I've given him a name. We know he's called Wart because I've mentioned that before. I don't know why I called him Wart. I just imagined this old face with sort of warts on his face, and I thought, I'll just call him Wart. But it's up to you. Call him whatever you want. But a name can say a lot about a person and where they're from. The name, where they're from, the environment they currently live in is all connected. And his age. His age will have a big impact on the things he has. Obviously a young adult teenager will have a lot more things that an older guy who's 55 years old wouldn't have. So it's, again, think about that. I've done a visual description of what I think Wart looks like, and I've even done a little concept which I'll show you in the next lecture when we look through the sort of sketches and the art that I've done for this. But you can see again, I've underlined elements about him that I think we can use in our scene. He lives an outdoor, rough living lifestyle, and that in itself will have a huge impact. He's living in that hut, for example, and he's very outdoorsy living. So, his outside is his inside. He lives basically rough, and that needs to be reflected in the scene. He's laboured hard and under the sun, and you can see that on his skin, for example. So when the concept guys do the concept for him, they'll take all this into account, but you can also take it into account in the environment. If he's laboured hard, what does that mean? Has he got, I'll show you what it means in a second, but he's obviously been doing something, and the things that he has been doing needs to tie into your scene. So you can almost get a story of a character just by looking. You don't have to say anything. Again, there's the description, hard labour. So he's a hard worker. He's doing something that requires hard labour. So there's going to be some equipment, obviously, or some tools, some elements, some things he uses to do this job. His boots are often caked in mud, so a good visual there. It's obviously the forest is a very muddy environment. So his appearance disguises trade and dexterity. He is fit and strong, not of ill health, although scarred hands and face does show a troubled past, and he can defend himself should the need arise. Okay, so he can obviously take care of himself. There's wolves in this forest, so he's going to protect himself against those, and he has no problem doing that. So we can show that in our scene. And a backstory. A backstory is really interesting because you can pull little details from a backstory, things he might have. If we're doing an inside, for example, you might have a little picture of a daughter he once had, or his parents, or just something to visual to fill out the scene and to fill out the story of why this guy's there. Just visual reference. It's really important. I've said that his family were living on the breadline. They were very poor, so he's not going to have much. From them. He joined the army at a young age, so he's fairly fit. He knows how to take care of himself. He travelled the globe. He's got military training. He learned how to use weapons, so that's quite key. He's going to perhaps have some weapons around, or he's going to know how to use them, how to store them. All those elements are quite key. He knows how to hunt. There you go. That's really, really important, because he's living wild, so he'll have hunting gear lying around and evidence of that. When you see his hut, you should see evidence of his hunting, and that can be in the form of spears, weapons, or it can be in the form of, dangling bones that he's collected and skeletons and trophies. I've even mentioned trophies here. So habitually collects trophies to mark his success. To mark his successes. That's really cool, because that can make it really visual. You can have a lot of dangling sort of bones and that, and if it's a windy environment, you can just imagine a really sort of atmospheric scene where the bones are sort of jangling and tinkling in the wind as they sort of move. And that's quite creepy, quite cool sort of element. And that comes from his sort of narrative, why he's there, and he's a hunter and he does all this stuff. And so you're building the scene and the atmosphere around him. He's learned how to hunt, how to survive in the most extreme conditions, and he's learned to be self-sufficient. So that needs to show. He needs to, maybe he's got cooking equipment or elements that will make him self-sufficient in that environment. In the winter it's going to be cold. Like here, he could have furs and antlers, bones, specific elements from his hunts. All that can be hanging around and on display. So he has little interest beyond this, as he's more focused on staying alive, avoiding the wolves, and finding the rock that holds the precious metal. So what I've said here is that so if we get down to his vocation, motivation and purpose in the game, I've said that he's a prospector. He's now convinced there are precious metals embedded in the rocks around the forest, and that quite key, because that'll feed a lot of the objects that you can plant around the hut, and he wants to protect that as well. So if he has found precious metals, then he's going to want to protect it, and from anybody who's wandering through, or and that could be very elaborate. I'm not going to go into too much detail. I'm not going to create too much artwork here, but you get the idea. You could really go to town on that. You can imagine a concept artist just taking that description there and drawing a lot of elements that will make the scene really interesting looking. And then as a 3D artist, you could build those really cool devices, traps or protection barriers, all sorts of things, weapons that will protect him from anybody who's come along to try and take his precious metals away. Again, it requires a lot of heavy lifting. So this guy is quite heavy, beefy character, I reckon. Lots of chiseling and lots of digging, so he's going to have equipment for doing that. And he's got to contend with the pack of wolves that are living nearby. So, and I've put some notes in this document. I'm going to put this document attached to this lecture, so you should be able to download it. If you haven't already, you should go and grab that and you can read it for yourself. And I've put some notes in here. Think about how your character feels, because that's quite important. How does your character move around his or her environment? Is he just on foot, or has he got some other way of getting around? Like I described in the visual brief, that I've got this wooden path that runs through the trees, and maybe put some sort of ladder or some sort of device for getting up into the trees, and now he can run through the trees. All this is really good visual elements that you can build into your scene. Does he need special items or equipment to exist in his environment? Does he need special items to do his job, which he obviously does, because I've mentioned it up there. And what does he get from doing that? From doing his job? And I'll show you all the things that I've come up with, although I could go a lot further, but it takes a lot of time to create this stuff. But for you, you can really go to town. Okay, we know the location, we know where it's at. Yeah, so that's from the previous, I've lifted that from the visual brief, and I've linked the quests again because the quests could help you. Linked quests can help you sort of like build more visual elements that will make the scene a lot more interesting. And I've put a summary at the end here, and you can see that. And I've given you some more ideas that you can play with. Religious belief. If he's a religious person, that's really going to show in his environment for sure, especially inside the hut. If you're doing the inside, his educational background, his intellectual level, that's going to have an influence. Is he really intelligent? And the devices and objects that he's got could show his intellect. Or if he's not so intelligent, then maybe he's quite basic. What is his life goals? Was he there? What is he trying to do? What's his ultimate goal? We know what drives him at the moment. He's there to get this valuable metal out of the rocks. But is it logic or is it emotion that drives his actions? What's he doing there? Does he have a disability? Maybe he does. Maybe he has a disability, and we can, again, build elements that we can build visual elements that show that. Does he smoke and does he drink? If he's a drinker, then there's going to be like evidence of that scattered all over the environment. Again, it's just a document that really gets your mind thinking, and so you can just do sketches, and so you can do a visual list of ideas that really help you build your scene, because you can build a hut in the middle of a forest like I've done, but it's quite static. It doesn't really say a lot, but now this is the detail, this is the elements that you're going to build to make your scene really come alive and look interesting. It doesn't matter what scene it is, it doesn't matter where it is in the world or who's living there. You can apply these techniques to that and you'll get the same result. You'll get the same ideas flowing. And a good example is Lara Croft. Look at her, look at that character, and look at her environment. It's all about her father. He's an archaeologist, and so is she. She becomes an archaeologist, but she's an action hero as well. But if you think about her environment, think about it's all based around her character, her father, her life. It just works. So that's what you're trying to do here. You're trying to pull the life out of your character and put it into the scene. That's a really good way of describing it. You can download this now. But create your own if you're doing your own character or your own scene. I'll create a blank one, and I'll put a blank one there as well, and you can use that to build your own character bio. So in the next lecture we're going to look at some rough sketches. It's more like a sort of a list, a visual list that we're going to create next, and it doesn't matter what it looks like. Like I said to you before, it really doesn't matter, because you're just scribbling ideas, and your concept artists will deal with the real fine visuals that you need, but these are just visual ideas and sketches, and it just helps you there's something about using your hand on paper or on your tablet to draw the ideas that makes it stick. So just think of it like that, and that's what we're going to do next. So I'll see you in the next lecture.